cheated on my brother with his girlfriend. Now he broke up with his family. The girl got pregnant. This is going to be long, so bear with. It all started when I was in my mid-20s. My younger brother, Ezra, who was 19 at the time, left home to attend an out-of-state university. It was an exciting step for him, and I was genuinely proud of his ambition. Meanwhile, I had just wrapped up my own college journey. With my degree in hand, I decided to move back home, not to my parents' house, but to an apartment nearby so I could remain close to my family. It felt like the right thing to do. I wanted to be around for them, especially for Ezra, even though he was miles away. Ezra's girlfriend, Melanie, also 19, stayed behind to attend a local college. They had been inseparable throughout high school, practically attached at the hip. Everyone thought they were destined to be together forever. And honestly, I thought so too. Melanie was practically family. My parents adored her, and Ezra treated her like she hung the moon. Since she was around, we occasionally hung out. It wasn't anything too unusual at first. A movie here, grabbing a quick bite to eat there, she was fun to talk to. And since Ezra wasn't around, I figured it was harmless to keep her company now and then. I didn't realize I was treading on dangerous ground. Looking back, I wish I had. As time went on, Melanie and I started spending more time together. It wasn't intentional at first, or at least I told myself that. We would go to the movies, grab some food, and sometimes hang out at family dinner. My dad often extended invitations to her, considering her practically part of the family since she and Ezra had been together for years. They had this plan to get married after finishing school. Everyone supported their relationship, seeing it as one of those rare high school love stories that would stand the test of time. Things in the family had shifted, though. My dad had recently remarried, and we were all trying to navigate this new dynamic. His new wife brought her own kids into the fold, and one of them was close in age to Melanie. This added another layer of complexity to our gathering. We were all adjusting to new relationships and figuring out where everyone fit. Amid this, Melanie and I were spending more and more time together, and I didn't see or refused to see the line I was crossing. The situation became messier when my dad's new wife made a casual comment that planted a seed of trouble. She joked that I looked better with Melanie than Ezra did. At first I brushed it off, thinking it was just an offhand remark meant to tease. But Melanie heard it too, and she didn't take it well. She seemed offended, and I felt the need to defend her honor, though in hindsight I realized there was nothing honorable about my actions. Despite her initial reaction, something shifted between us. As we grew closer, Melanie began to make comments along the same line. At first, I tried to dismiss them, but a part of me liked hearing it. I liked the way she looked at me, and I started seeing her in a way I hadn't before. Or perhaps I had but was too ashamed to admit it. The guilt was there, lingering in the background, but it wasn't enough to stop me. Ezra came home occasionally, during the summer or for a weekend visit. When he was around, he and Melanie still acted like a couple. They would cuddle, hold hands, and even sleep together. I hated how much it bothered me. It made me jealous, though I had no right to feel that way. When Ezra left again, Melanie would turn to me for comfort, and I let her. I encouraged it. One night, things reached a boiling point. We were all hanging out at home, and Ezra and Melanie were snuggled up on the couch. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't hide my jealousy, and Melanie noticed. Later that night, she confronted me about it. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. It was the turning point I'd been waiting for, though I didn't realize how much damage it would cause. Even as I reveled in the moment, a part of me knew I was making a terrible mistake. I was betraying my brother in the worst way possible. And for what? My own selfish desires? It was wrong, and I am not proud of it. When my dad found out, he was furious. He demanded that Melanie and I put an end to whatever was going on between us. He was livid, and rightfully so. Melanie was no longer welcome at family dinners, and my dad even reached out to my mom, who he rarely talked to inform her about the situation. Meanwhile, my dad's wife, the same woman who had once made that offhand comment about me looking better with Melanie, had a completely different reaction. She was oddly supportive of us, or at least indifferent to the chaos we were causing. Aaron, one of my younger brothers, began to pick up on the tension. There are 6 of us brothers in total, and Aaron and I have never been particularly close. I've always felt like he had it out for me, though that's another story for another time. Aaron started to suspect something was off, and knowing him, he was probably putting the pieces together. He's always been the type to call people out, even when it's uncomfortable. Things came to a head during one of Ezra's visits home. Aaron, who had been quietly observing the situation, decided to take matters into his own hands. To this day, I have no idea how he found out or what exactly tipped him off, but somehow he pieced together what was happening between Melanie and me. Maybe it was the way I avoided eye contact with Ezra whenever Melanie was around. Or maybe he overheard something. Aaron was always good at picking up on what others tried to hide. He took Ezra aside during that visit and laid it all out for him. Aaron had always had it out for me, or at least that's how I felt at the time. He was the kind of sibling who would dig until he found something to criticize or hold against me. Whether his motivations were out of genuine concern for Ezra or a personal vendetta against me, I couldn't say. That's a story for another day, but the fact is, he told Ezra everything. What happened next turned my entire world upside down. Ezra, understandably, was furious. His anger wasn't just directed at me and Melanie, but also at our parents and even my dad's new wife. He lashed out at everyone, accusing them of enabling the situation, or staying silent when they should have intervened. He was especially harsh toward my dad's wife, who had been oddly supportive of Melanie and me from the start. Ezra felt betrayed on every level, and honestly, I couldn't blame him. After that confrontation, Ezra left. Not just the room, not just the house. He left the family. At first, I thought it was a temporary reaction, a way for him to cool off and process everything. But weeks turned into months, and it became clear that this wasn't just a break. Ezra was gone for good. It took about 8 months before he fully disappeared from our lives. During those 8 months, he distanced himself bit by bit. He stopped coming to family gatherings, avoided my calls, and eventually changed his number. By the time he moved a few towns over, we didn't even notice right away. It wasn't until we realized we hadn't seen him in a while that we started piecing it together. Looking back, those 8 months were some of the darkest in my life. I wasn't a kind person during that time. I was defensive, angry, and focused on justifying my actions instead of taking responsibility for the hurt I had caused. Melanie, too, was going through her own struggle. After Ezra found out, he confronted her directly, and the fallout was brutal. She was humiliated and cast as the villain. And while I wasn't proud of what we had done, I couldn't stand to see her treated that way, so I took her in. We became official, for better or worse, and faced the world together. Our family disapproved, of course. For a while, it felt like everyone was against us. My parents were torn between their anger at what we had done and their instinct to support me as their son. Eventually, they came around, though not without hesitation. When Melanie found out she was pregnant, things shifted. It wasn't just about us anymore. There was a baby involved, a life that deserved stability and love. I proposed to her, and our families, hesitant as they were, agreed that it was best for the baby that we marry. Both sides pitched in to pay for the wedding. It was a humble affair, but I was grateful that my family pulled through for me when I needed them. During this time, Aaron became even more vocal about his feelings. He was relentless in his criticism of our parents, accusing them of failing Ezra and enabling me. I understood where he was coming from. Ezra had been deeply hurt, and he needed our parents to be there for him, but I needed them too. I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, becoming a father, a husband, buying my first home, starting a big new job. I didn't have the luxury of dwelling on the past. I was focused on the future. That didn't mean I didn't feel the weight of what had happened, but I hoped that time would help heal the wounds. As the wedding approached, we sent out invitations to everyone, including Ezra and Aaron. I didn't expect them to come, but I still held out a sliver of hope. When I didn't hear back, I asked my mom to confirm with them. I understood if they didn't want to attend, but I needed to know. What we discovered shocked me. They were both gone, not just declining the invitation, but completely vanished. Aaron's longtime girlfriend, who RSVP'd no, refused to give any details about where he or Ezra had gone. One of my aunts, who had always been sympathetic to Aaron's perspective, told us they were safe and that we needed to let it go. Let it go? How could we? They were my brothers. Their absence cast a long shadow over our wedding. It should have been a joyous occasion, a new beginning for me, Melanie, and our baby on the way. Instead, it felt incomplete. My parents were visibly distraught. My dad, who had always tried to hold the family together, seemed defeated. My mom, despite her efforts to focus on the positive, couldn't hide her heartbreak. Melanie and I briefly considered giving our son a middle name that honored Ezra and Aaron, but ultimately, we decided against it. They would likely never meet him, and we didn't want to confuse him with the weight of names tied to unresolved family pain. I thought we had finally found some peace by the time Melanie and I welcomed our second child. It felt like we had moved on, or at least learned to live with the fractures in our family. My parents, despite everything, seemed genuinely happy to spend time with me, Melanie, and our growing family. My remaining brothers were finding their paths in life, and I tried to focus on supporting them when I could. For a while, things felt stable. Melanie and I had built a life together, a solid partnership, a home, and now 2 beautiful children. We were serious about each other, and I believed we were proving that our relationship wasn't just a mistake born out of chaos. But my mom, who had managed to accept our relationship for the sake of the grandkids, couldn't seem to let go of her regrets. One day, she sat Melanie and me down and admitted that she still struggled with how everything unfolded. She confessed that when she first learned about our relationship, she was firmly against it and couldn't understand how we could do that to Ezra. While she had come around when Melanie got pregnant, she now felt it had been a mistake, one that cost her 2 sons. Her honesty hit hard, especially for Melanie. Their relationship, which had always been fragile, took a sharp downturn after that conversation. My mom tried to frame it as regret for how the family was torn apart, but Melanie took it as a rejection. Not just of her, but of our children too. It wasn't easy for me to navigate. I could see both sides. My mom was mourning the loss of Ezra and Aaron, and Melanie was hurt that even after years of building a life together, she still felt like an outsider in my family. Meanwhile, my dad's side of the family was much more welcoming to Melanie. They treated her as one of their own, which was a relief, but also bittersweet. My dad missed Ezra and Aaron terribly, but he poured his energy into being a loving grandfather. He seemed to have made peace with the fact that he couldn't undo the past, and for a long time, that was enough. But then my mom took matters into her own hands. She decided to try and find Ezra and Aaron. At first, she didn't tell anyone what she was doing, but it wasn't long before we found out. When she finally located them, it was like reopening a wound that had barely started to scab over. Ezra had married a woman none of us knew, and they had a large family, more children than Melanie and I. Aaron had also married his longtime girlfriend, the one who RSVP'd no to our wedding all those years ago. They had moved far away and were raising their own children. My mom, who had started going to therapy to work through her grief and guilt, reached out to them. To my surprise, Ezra agreed to reconcile, at least partially. Aaron, on the other hand, refused. He wanted nothing to do with our family, though his wife and children were open to maintaining a relationship with my mom. For the past year, my mom has been in contact with Ezra. She's even visited him several times, taking my youngest brothers with her to spend Christmas with Ezra and his family. Seeing the pictures on her Facebook was a gut punch. There they were. My brother, his wife, their children, smiling faces, happy moments. A life I wasn't a part of. I wrestled with whether to tell my dad, knowing how much it would hurt him. In the end, I decided to show him before someone else could. Our family has always been a bit gossipy, and I didn't want him to find out secondhand. When he saw the photos, he was overcome. He stared at them for a long time, as if trying to absorb every detail. Then he called my mom, and they talked for hours. Now I sit here surrounded by the pieces of a fractured family. My relationships are strained in every direction. My mom doesn't approve of me or my family. She and Melanie don't speak anymore, which makes every family gathering a minefield of tension. My dad, who once seemed content to focus on the grandchildren he had, is now heartbroken all over again, haunted by the life he missed out on with Ezra and Aaron. Ezra and Aaron have moved on completely. They've built lives of their own, and from what I can tell, they're still close. Aaron won't speak to my mom, but his wife and children do, which only adds to the complexity. Meanwhile, my remaining brothers, though I love them dearly, are much younger than me. They're still figuring out who they are, and while I try to be a good older brother, I can't relate to them the way I related to Ezra and Aaron.